I'm Lauren, and I'm 33 years old. Being a housewife, I can't help but reflect on my life as I stand here now. It resembles a network composed of several strands representing responsibilities, standards, and the silent sacrifices made by the people we care about. My father is an important part of my narrative as well as me. He was a nice and polite man who, without really realizing it, got sucked into the responsibilities of my married life. Life was easier 6 years ago. Along with my husband, Jack, and his mother, Cheryl, I shared a cozy little home on the outskirts of the city. Although this may seem like a nice family setting to you, there is a problem. There was an unwritten rule in that house that my father had to pay for everything. Each month, he discreetly paid all of our bills. Even though he never expressed complaints or discomfort, I could tell how difficult it was for him. It was difficult to live with Jack and Cheryl. It resembled tightrope walking. Cheryl never concealed what she expected, even with her cutting remarks and forceful presence. "This way, Lauren, it's better," she would frequently comment. "It keeps the family comfortable, and your father can afford it." Her voice always indicated that this was more of an order than a request. Jack, for his part, remained silent and let events unfold. His quiet was insistent, as though he already agreed with all that was said without having to express it. I believed in the promises I made to Jack when we were married, and I loved him even if it was difficult. I stayed in that house because of it, holding out hope that something would improve. I hoped for a change every day. I was hoping for a sign that things would turn around and that we might truly become a family, bonded by love rather than possessions. However, I knew in my heart that I was clinging to an unreal fantasy. It was a fiction, and the weight of unwritten guidelines and forced grins was gradually crushing it. I can't believe how much those years shaped me as I sit here reflecting back on them. They imparted to me lessons on resilience and the bittersweet realities of family and love. But I still had a long way to go in living my toughest life. Everything started with a phone call that had a profound impact. My world collapsed on the day my father passed away. I recall every little thing as though it were yesterday. I hurried to the hospital after receiving the urgent phone call. It felt like they were mourning with me since the hallways were deserted and chilly. My father passed away before I could say goodbye to him due to an unexpected heart attack, despite the medical professionals' best efforts. He died, and I was enveloped by intense sadness for several days. Not only did I lose my father, but I also lost the cornerstone of my existence. He had been my pillar of support, the silent power that got me through every trying time. I felt adrift without him. After then, everything was different. My father had always supported me, and now he was no longer with me. Not only was I grieving for him, but I was also missing the security and stability he had given. I felt as like everything in my world had changed, and I didn't know how I would manage without him. I had a disoriented feeling, as though I was adrift in an uncontrollably turbulent sea of feelings. My father's attorney called me during this trying period. I was invited to his office to discuss my father's will with him. It seemed unnatural for me to consider making a will when I was still in mourning. Everything appeared cold and structured when I got to the lawyer's office, which was the exact opposite of how I felt. The lawyer went over what my father had left for me, his only child, as I sat there in quiet. He informed me that I had been bequeathed $80 million by my father, along with a stunning home in one of the city's most exclusive areas. The sum of money was so enormous that it appeared unreal. It was hard for me to believe. I even harbored a small yearning that there had been some sort of error. I felt this bequest was a big burden when I returned home. I could sense a difference as soon as I walked through the door. My mother-in-law, Cheryl had changed her customary expression on me from one of calculation and coldness to one of avarice. Her voice brimming with contrived pity, she cornered me in the living room. "Lauren," she began, but her tone quickly hardened and demanded, "You must give Jack the home and move the $80 million into my account. It's in the family's best interests." Her demand hovered like a heavy fog in the atmosphere. My mother-in-law wasn't providing me with any consolation or support, and I was still dealing with the grief of losing my father. Rather, she viewed this as an opportunity to take care of her kid and herself. The arrogance of her to expect me to give up all my father had left me was beyond me. It dawned on me then that their generosity had never been genuine. Rather, it had lasted as long as my father could support us. I spoke with more strength in my voice than I actually had, saying, "I can't do that, Cheryl. My father gave me the house, and that money is his parting gifts. Nobody can take that away from me, I promise." Cheryl's countenance first twisted with amazement, then became angry. With a menacing tone in her voice, she took a step towards me. "Lauren, you're going to regret this choice. I swear to you that." The home felt smaller as I stood there, not bowing to her demands. I had the impression that the walls were closing in on me, that a storm was approaching. For the first time, I had defied Cheryl, but I was unsure of the price. I prepared myself for whatever came next, since I knew that my life was going to be completely flipped upside down. The consequences of my choice were severe and swift. The house I lived with Jack and Cheryl turned into a war zone in a matter of days. There was an intense atmosphere of animosity, and there were many accusations in the stillness between us. The guy I had loved and trusted, Jack, now looked at me with bitterness and uncertainty. He appeared divided between the life we had created together and his mother's machinations. One chilly morning, things came to a breaking point when Jack gave me the divorce papers. He was unable to look me in the eye, yet his hands were solid. He muttered, seemingly to himself, "Lauren, this is how it has to be." My heart was already injured from everything I had gone through, so his comments felt like a knife to it. Though I was shocked that it had come to this, I knew in my heart that this was the price I would have to pay for advocating for myself. That's when it dawned on me that I wasn't simply losing a spouse. I was being discarded because I didn't fit into their ideal version of me. I shook my hand and signed the divorce papers. More than just a mark on paper, my signature signified the close of one chapter in my life and the beginning of an unknown one. Cheryl was waiting for me in the doorway, grinning smugly as I picked up my belongings to depart. "You brought this on yourself," she continued, her harshness evident in her voice. Her remarks hurt, but I said nothing. Knowing that I was leaving behind a life in which I was never truly respected, I simply continued packing. I moved into the house my father had left for me once the divorce was finalized, and I became an independent person. It was a grand mansion, vastly different in size from the little cottage I'd just been kicked out of. I was alone myself in this large house, with its vacant rooms and winding halls, and I was having trouble getting back to normal. Even though it seemed awkward and lonely at times, I had to remind myself that this was my new beginning when the solitude became oppressive. But problems from life continued to come my way. I found very shortly after I moved in that Jack had suffered a serious injury at work. He was a security guard when an incident occurred, breaking his leg. I couldn't help but notice the irony. He was jobless and defenseless now, but he had formerly been powerful and self-assured. Jack arrived at my home a few days later, hobbling on crutches. His expression was desperate. He appeared to be an entirely different person from the one I had previously adored. With a timid, unsure voice, he whispered, "Lauren, I need help. I'm not good, but I've made mistakes. I have nowhere else to go, and I am unable to work." His eyes were filled with agony, and a part of me wanted to assist him. He seemed to be looking to me for forgiveness and support while he put the pieces back together. However, the scars from our history were still too recent. I could not ignore the betrayal. It was still too profound. I had discovered the hard way that, despite how painful it was to say no, I had to prioritize taking care of myself. I apologized to Jack, maintaining a calm tone of voice despite the tempest inside of me. I am unable to. I now have to make my decision after you made yours. I felt as though I was shutting the door on my former existence when I closed the door on Jack. The last link to that traumatic chapter was vanished. It was time for me to turn my attention to reconstructing my life, not simply my house. I knew that I had to go forth, stronger and more resolute than before, since the path was mine to take alone. The quiet, empty rooms of the house my father left me no longer felt so lonely, as I became used to my new situation. Rather, they began to feel incredibly optimistic. This property offered me a fresh start with its lovely gardens and well-lit halls. There I would rediscover who I was. I was prepared for the hardships that were ahead. My past hardships had instilled in me the trait of resilience. It was time for me to take charge of my life and start living it how I wanted. This was my opportunity to become stronger and wiser and build a future that genuinely belonged to me by rising from the ashes. I started to see a different goal for my life, one that would benefit others in addition to aiding in my recovery. I considered making an inviting and secure environment for senior citizens without a dwelling of their own. My father's desire to always support the community served as the inspiration for this concept. I wanted to respect his strong desire to give back. I made the decision to build an aging residence on my acreage. In addition to giving them a place to stay, I wanted to create a vibrant, welcoming community where they could exchange laughs, knowledge, and tales. I envisioned it as a place where individuals might genuinely enjoy their senior years and feel at home. I gave the estate my whole attention and invested all of my resources and passion. I worked on every room, making sure that each space felt comfortable and welcoming. Every small detail mattered, from the first furniture to the decorations. I wanted the house to feel like a place full of warmth and kindness. The work was hard and tiring, but at the same time, it was incredibly rewarding. With every new thing I added to the home, I felt a bit of my old pain healing. The physical effort of renovating the house was also healing for my emotional wounds. As I worked day by day, I finally started to accept the end of my marriage and the betrayal that came with it. I realized that building this new home was not only creating a future for others, but also helping me move forward from my past. As the house neared completion, I started meeting the people who might move in. Each elderly person I spoke to had a unique story to share, and their faces showed a lifetime of experiences. There was hope in their eyes, and I could see they were looking forward to this new chapter in their lives. I listened closely to their stories, which were full of strength, resilience, and life lessons. Soon, the house started to fill with its new residents. The once empty rooms were now alive with conversation and laughter. One of the first residents, Mrs. Teresa May, stood out. She was an energetic 85-year-old with bright eyes and a love for storytelling. She quickly became the heart of our little community, sharing stories from her youth that were both funny and wise. Every evening, she would gather everyone in the common room, filling the space with laughter and sometimes even a few tears. One evening, while we were watching the sunset from the porch, Mrs. May turned to me and said, "It's all about making the most of every day, dear." Her words hit me deeply, reminding me that time is precious, and it's important to live every moment fully. In this new life, I found joy in the simple things. We shared meals together, celebrated birthdays, and spent time just listening to each other. The house was no longer just a building. It had become a living, breathing community. The people who lived there had created a home filled with love and connection, woven together by the shared experiences of their lives. This lively community helped me rediscover who I am. I had let go of the hurt from the past and was looking forward to the future with hope. I was prepared for the next challenge. Not only had the house fulfilled my father's ambition, but it had also fostered a community. I discovered pleasure, healing, and a fresh sense of purpose in life by realizing this ambition. I felt so at ease since I had discovered a new purpose. I felt like I had a new beginning and was at home for the first time in years thanks to the small act of assisting others. My heart shifted with the seasons. Under my direction, the senior home flourished, and every day I felt greater happiness and love all around me. Every chuckle, every grin, every tale told by the folks who now called it home warmed my heart. One day, while going about my daily business of managing the household money at the neighborhood bank, fate had an unexpected surprise in store for me. I paused for a second when I saw the bank manager's expression as I approached his desk. "Scott," I answered, a hint of astonishment in my voice. It was my boyhood friend, Scott. With the same kind smile and kind eyes that had previously comforted me, he sat behind the desk looking every bit the professional. We had a lot of wonderful memories from our school days together when we were younger. After all these years, here he finally was. He exclaimed, "Lauren, it's been ages," with sincere joy in his voice. As soon as we got to speak, we caught up on everything that had elapsed throughout the years. Time seemed to have stopped completely. We chuckled as we reminisced about our childhood, when we would race bicycles around the neighborhood streets and had afternoon conversations about our aspirations. But we were no longer those innocent kids. After we had grown up, we had rather different lifestyles. Our bank meetings increased in frequency over time. Our bond became stronger each time we got together. Soon after, Scott began to show interest in the job I was doing and began to visit the senior home. His visits meant a lot to me because he wasn't just being kind. He actually cared about the patients, and he made everyone he came into contact with happy and laughing. Scott's serene and unwavering presence seemed like a breath of fresh air to me following all the challenging and traumatic relationships I had experienced. Having someone who was trustworthy, polite, and considerate felt wonderful. He actually interacted with me and the people in my life, not simply listened to me. He was loved by the elderly and became a frequent visitor who made them smile every day. As we frequently did, we strolled around the house's grounds one cool fall evening. The leaves were beginning to turn color, painting the ground in tones of orange and gold, and the air was cold. Scott abruptly stopped and turned to face me as we were walking. There was tenderness in his solemn look, and it was obvious that he was thinking about something significant. "Lauren," he said, his hands fumbling tensely with a tiny box he had taken out of his pocket. "You've made me and other people really happy, and I've seen that you do the same for me. I find it impossible to envision my life without you. Are you going to marry me?" My breath left me when he said it. I was shocked not just by the idea, but also by how accurate it seemed. For so long, Scott had been a part of my life, first as a buddy, and now as much more. He had seen me at my best and worst, and even though he knew me better than most, he still desired to live out the rest of his days with me. "Yes, Scott," I said, a smile on my face and tears in my eyes. I became aware of how far I had gone from loss and grief at that very moment. I had discovered a new love in addition to a new mission. Scott served as a reminder that although life might take unexpected detours, occasionally those detours carry us to precisely the right place. With a calm yet passionate voice, I answered, Yes, I will marry you. My heart felt content at that very moment. I discovered someone who wanted to spend the rest of their life with me, someone who actually saw me for who I was. The seemingly insignificant word yes meant so much to me. It was a pledge to Scott and a pledge to myself to accept pleasure and love in the wake of all the suffering and difficulties I had encountered. Our nuptials were a modest yet exquisite event. We decided to have it in the same grounds where Scott had asked us to marry. We had grown to love those gardens as a haven of tranquility and beauty. We invited the folks who had grown to be like family to meet the folks who worked at the old people's home I had built, as well as a few close friends. The vista was enchanted by the sun's lowering golden colors, giving the impression that the heavens were endorsing our union. I made a promise of love and dedication to Scott as we stood beneath the waning light. It was flawless. It wasn't a big occasion with plenty of hype. It was authentic, heartfelt, and true. We committed to being there for one another during good times and bad, to always be kind, and to help one another. I had a gut feeling that Scott was the companion I had been waiting for my entire life. Living with Scott gave me a feeling of fulfillment. I was ignorant before to this. It was about feeling entire, not simply about happiness. Together, we tackled the tiny problems that come with daily living, such as little household repairs and taking care of duties at the senior citizen's home. But we always faced challenges together, no matter what they were. When I needed it, Scott was always there to provide a sympathetic ear or a helpful hand. He was also quite nice. The house, which represented my new beginning earlier, now represents our future together. The love and happiness that had grown between us appeared to be reflected in every nook and cranny of the house. The same hallways that had resonated with my isolation were now alive with warmth from a loving household, laughing and discussion. I was thankful for each step that had brought me to this point, since I could clearly see how much my life had changed. As I reflected on my path, I saw how far I had come from the depressing and uncertain days following my father's passing, and my trying divorce to the happiness and serenity I currently experienced. It was an amazing metamorphosis. Despite all the obstacles I had to overcome, life had taught me something important at every step. My previous suffering made it easier for me to recognize the joy and beauty in my current existence. I might not have appreciated the importance of what I had right now if I had never experienced those trying times. I'd become stronger, more resilient, and more conscious of the value of compassion, love, and community as a result of the difficult times. I came to understand that although life has many unexpected turns, every stride I have taken has led me one step closer to my destiny. My creation, the senior home, too became a unique aspect of our trip. It was now a vibrant community rather than merely a location where people lived. I considered the residents to be family, and they had accepted Scott into their hearts in the same way that they had accepted me. Everyone who lived in our house, not just us, left behind a legacy of love, laughter, and memories. Every day became significant because of the feeling of connection and belonging. I used to think a lot about the strength of fresh starts. Every morning served as a reminder to me that there are countless opportunities in life. Whatever obstacles or misfortunes we encounter, there is always potential for improvement and optimism. Change is something to welcome with open arms, rather than something to be afraid of. That was a lesson I had to learn the hard way, but I was glad I had. Together, Scott and I started making plans for the future, eagerly anticipating what was ahead. We had aspirations of growing the senior home and turning it into an even more welcoming haven for those in need. My father's desire was the same as ours, to keep helping others. I felt as though I was carrying on part of my father's heritage by realizing this ambition. I was confident that the life I had created, and the decisions I had taken would have made him proud. Scott and I had a strong sense of purpose together. It was about the love we shared with the people surrounding us, as well as our love for one another. We had discovered a method to combine our delight with a purpose that offered our life more significance. Every day seemed like a gift, full with happy and meaningful experiences. I feel at ease thinking about the days that lie ahead. I have Scott by my side and a community that is built on love and respect. So I know that even though life will continue to provide problems, I have the power to overcome them. I'm excited for whatever is ahead. I have learned to welcome the changes and the chances they bring, so I am no longer fearful of what lies ahead. Ultimately, I am incredibly appreciative of everything that helped me get here, good and bad. I couldn't have enjoyed the beauty of my current existence without the sorrow. I am reminded of how far I have come with every day, and I am confident that the trip ahead will be full of love, laughter, and limitless opportunities. There are always surprises in life, and I'm prepared for whatever happens next.